Hi friends, welcome to the channel. Hit the like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment with an emoji just for the sake of engagement.
Chapter 6. While doing her makeup the next day, her maids asked her if she had any trouble sleeping since she looked tired, and were gushing since both of them seemed to have such a great relationship. Julia replied that she was just tired because the bed was unfamiliar. The maids told her that it was fine this time, since it's only a banquet celebration combined with a hunting festival. She also told her that for her coming-of-age ceremony, she shouldn't stay up late if she wanted to look perfect. Since many nobles would be attending the event, she should be the most dazzling person in the room. Julia looked tired because of what had happened last night and didn't sleep well, but looked like everybody was misunderstanding her. Her husband, dressed in his formal attire, was waiting for his wife, looking for Julia, and realized that she was running late. Julia, after getting ready, came to him, apologizing for keeping him waiting, and upon seeing her, his eyes flushed, and he was blushing. He replied, "It was always a pleasure to wait for her." Hearing his remarks, Julia noticed that Mion was still as unusual as he had been the day before, but his words felt different, not wanting to give it more thought than it needed. She held his hands and left the room. When they reached the hunting grounds, everyone greeted them before the hunting festival began. Mion and Julia were going to have their coming-of-age celebration banquet first. Originally, it was an event reserved for high-ranking officials and their immediate families. But this time, since she had invited all the candidates, they were also in attendance. She had planned to observe the young ladies and narrow down the candidates. But because of what happened last night, she couldn't focus properly. Thinking of everything made her tired. When Mion noticed, he asked her if she was tired and remarked that greeting so many nobles at once must be exhausting. She looked at him and replied that even though it was pulling it off gracefully is the role of a queen, asking him how she did. He came closer to her and replied that she was way too perfect, and that was the only problem. So charming. Julia noticed his strange behavior once again and finally came to the conclusion that she was feeling awkward because he kept on calling her his queen. Even meeting his gaze made her feel embarrassed. She also wondered why he was acting so unfamiliar. While glancing at him, she wondered if he really liked her. Yes, girl, you are stupid. If that was the case, she would have liked to ask Mion about his feelings before choosing Concubine. As she was about to talk, Duke Kennedy greeted and congratulated them on reaching adulthood. Seeing him, Julia realized that Kiera, Mion's former fiancée, was also there. She greeted them, and Julia reciprocated, telling Lady Sore that she was glad to meet her and asking about her well-being. When she addressed Mion, however, telling him that it had been a long time since they met, he simply replied with a yes, not showing any affection. She quickly apologized for not visiting more often, as she was unwell for some reason and didn't wish to trouble anyone. Mion replied that she was looking healthy now, hoping she would remain in good health. She was having a conversation with Mion about their past and how they played together in the flower field with Iris, which made Julia realize that these were stories she didn't know about, and she felt uneasy. She wondered why she felt like this, since she was the one who arranged this gathering. Lady Sore told Mion that she wanted to commemorate their meeting by presenting a bottle of traditional wine from Turb. Julia knew that Mion couldn't drink alcohol, so she was wondering whether he would turn the gift down, but when Mion didn't reject her drink, she was questioning if it was because the gift was brought by Lady Kiera. As Mion was about to get up from his seat to accept the gift, Julia stopped him and replied on his behalf, telling Lady Kiera that it was a shame, but she would drink it on his behalf. Lady Kiera was annoyed and told Julia that this wine was meant for His Highness to enjoy during the banquet. But Julia promptly replied that she couldn't let her husband, who was participating in the hunting tournament, drink something that might affect his focus, telling her that she enjoys a good wine more than her husband does. Lady Kiera was adamant. She stated that she specifically brought this wine because she wanted to gift it to Mion directly. Julia knew that unless Mion said something in this situation, she really wouldn't be able to stop her and was wondering whether he was not going to refuse because the gift was from Lady Kiera. She was relieved when he spoke and told Lady Kiera that they should do as the queen had said. He replied that he was weak with alcohol, and the fact that his queen drinks on his behalf was supposed to be a secret between them as a couple. But thanks to her insistence, it was now out in the open. Looking at her, he told her that she should have listened when the queen said it the first time. He finally remarked that the lady has quite a talent for making others uncomfortable. Chapter 7. Kiera began crying and begged for his forgiveness. She stated that she was abroad for a long time and was very overjoyed to see him again. But Mion interrupted her, telling her that from the next time, he hopes that she will follow his queen's words without delay. He also told her that she might not have known since she was abroad for a long time. But in simile, his queen's word was law. As Kiera was about to speak again, her father stopped her, telling her that anything more would be disrespectful to the queen. Now, friends, I don't know about you, but I really feel bad for Kiera because Julia invited her herself, which she shouldn't have if she was so unsure of everything. When Kiera apologized for her rudeness, Julia, sensing the atmosphere was tense, raised her glass and told Kiera that she understood the lady's feelings for His Majesty and asked her to pour her a drink. She also noticed the Duke's expression towards his daughter, making her question what had happened between them. As she was traveling around, a lot of people greeted her, asking about her dress, and seeing all these people made her exhausted because the greetings were taking longer than usual. When she reached near the conservative noble's tent, she wondered if she should greet them, but upon reaching closer, she realized that they were talking about her. The nobles were openly discussing how she was just a powerless flower from a minor and rustic kingdom, and how she couldn't even bear an heir, but the nobles couldn't do anything about it since she was still the person that the king favored the most, and he was said to have become the most capable leader in history with his martial skills so great that a single strike could cleave a mountain in two. It was almost godlike, and they were also discussing how a person with such valor becomes helpless before his wife. They remarked that since he was still young, he didn't know what was truly important for their country, and that Kiera would have been a much better choice. If it weren't for the drought, the beloved of the gods wouldn't have been crowned the queen. One of the nobles had heard that this gathering was also arranged to discuss taking in a concubine and believed that it didn't seem like they were entirely against the idea. They began comparing Julia with Lady Kiera, discussing how, if Mion and Kiera were to be married, the nation's prestige would have soared because the beloved of the gods was just an outdated tale, and it wasn't like she could cast magic herself. They were making fun of how Mion, who was like a god, treasured her, and were laughing about the fact that somehow their queen was truly the very beloved of the gods. When Julia heard everything, she decided to return back, but she was caught by Mion, who noticed her strange expression. When she saw Mion standing nearby, she didn't know how long he was there, but was glad that he didn't hear the noble's conversation and decided to put on a brave face. Mion asked if something had happened, and she replied that if something had happened, she would have told him, but he immediately called her a liar, telling her that she was near the conservative noble's quarters, wondering what nonsense they spouted now, thinking of burying them in the hunting grounds, lol. Julia noted that Mion's intuition was too sharp and replied that nothing had happened, telling him that a wise king shouldn't say things like that. Mion remarked that he was more of a tyrant. In response, which made Julia laugh as she was fixing his dress, he told her that it seemed his queen liked others more than him, and Julia, while smiling, replied that she always only supported him. Mion stated that if it was true, Julia should go hunting with him. Realizing that he was worrying about her, she replied that she should stay here and look after the guests because if she came with him, the conservatives might truly lose their minds and accuse him of not fully fulfilling his role properly. Mion, with a stern look on his face, reminded Julia that he would absolutely do anything she wanted and would make it happen no matter how busy. Before leaving, he told her that no matter how busy she was, she should remember to make some time for him later and meet on the Western Plains. Julia asked him if it was a walking path since it was a bit far from the banquet hall, but Mion left by simply telling her to be there as he had something to say later. Julia's mind went into overdrive, thinking of all possible rubbish things, and before her mind could overtake her reasoning, she stopped Mion, telling him that since hunting and mingling with the nobles would take at least 3 hours, she requested him to tell her right then. But Mion simply held her hands and kissed them, asking her if she had already guessed. Mion's guards came to inform him that the hunting festival was starting, so before leaving her, Mion told her that he would be waiting, and as the horn was blown indicating the start of the hunt, Mion left Julia, but it turned out that somebody was hiding behind the tree, listening to every conversation. Okay, I don't like this girl. Chapter 8. As the time that Mion mentioned was approaching, she couldn't focus on the banquet. The banquet was clearly to find a legitimate noble lady as a concubine, but she felt like she was getting caught up with Mion. Julia suddenly noticed Lady Kiera and Iris together, and she was wondering what they were talking about. Looking at their behavior, she suddenly noticed that Iris was looking in her direction and smiled. Iris was not the one to show up at formal events, but she guessed that she came because Kiera was her friend. Some of the noble ladies asked Julia if she had heard the news that Kiera had returned from the kingdom of Turb just 2 weeks ago and told her that she left Semele when she was young due to illness. Julia smiled and replied that Lady Kiera must have felt frustrated making the Duke plan a trip for her. The noble ladies heard her reply that they had heard that she returned just because of the rumors that the king was planning to take a concubine. Julia realized that the rumors were already spreading among the young ladies. They were also discussing how Lady Kiera was quite active in the past in high society, and if she became the concubine, it would be better for the country's political situation since she has the bloodline of the kingdom of Turb. Sometime later, Julia somehow managed to get out of the banquet, and as she was heading to the location where Mion was waiting, she was thinking how Kiera was the most suited person for the concubine, and it was almost inevitable that she would be one. But suddenly the thought of Mion popped in her head, making her blush. She tried to dismiss her thought because it was already confusing her, and now she had to deal with the concubine issue too. Suddenly, she heard rustling of leaves from behind her, and when she turned around, wondering if Mion was already there, she saw that it was Lady Kiera waiting for her. Meanwhile, Mion was with Kiera's father and was thinking to himself that he might be late. The Duke tried making small talk with Mion, telling him that it had been a while since they met, as normally they would have gone hunting together often because they were relatives by marriage, calling it ironic. But seeing that Mion didn't pay any attention to him, he began thinking of how Mion was ignoring him and how Kiera wanted to give up their life so she could marry this man. But now that he had seen him up front, it didn't seem that he was in the mood for marriage, wondering what Kiera might be thinking. Back to Julia, Kiera told her that she had been waiting for her to arrive. Not knowing that her life was endangered, Julia genuinely questioned Kiera if there was any problem and asked her how she knew that she would be here. Kiera smiled and replied that she had overheard her mentioning meeting Mion at the plains earlier. Julia thought that it was weird and asked Kiera if it was an urgent matter because not only did she eavesdrop on a conversation between a couple, but she came all the way here. Kiera told Julia to stop wasting time and to choose her as her concubine, making the situation tense. Julia couldn't believe her choice of words, but before she could react, Kiera continued by telling her that it was only natural because if she hadn't taken her place, she would have been the one to marry Mion. She told her that if she had any compassion, it would be reasonable to pick her as a computer. Julia chuckled and replied that Kiera seemed to be under a big misconception, but she was thinking that no matter how powerless she might be, she couldn't accept such a rude attitude, and now she doesn't even want to choose her or take her into consideration. She told her that although it was true that she wanted to choose a concubine as the person who manages the inner court of Semele, the selection of a concubine solely depends on her choice as the queen, and it was her duty to choose a person who could take responsibility and contribute to this empire. However, from her tone and her attitude, she didn't seem like someone who was perfect. Finally, she told her that she doesn't see a reason why she should choose her. Hearing her answer, Kiera was petrified, and I was terrified. As she turned to leave, she told Kiera to head back, and she would keep this meeting a secret from Mion. Kiera began trembling in anger and told her that the position was originally hers, and she was the one who took it. Julia was really angry, but as she turned around, her eyes widened in fear upon seeing a knife held at Kiera's wrist. She questioned her as to what she was doing, and Kiera threatened her to accept her as a concubine and started cutting her wrist, telling her that she would blame the queen for harming her out of jealousy. Julia questioned her if she was trying to threaten the queen, but Kiera, having lost all common sense, asked her if she wasn't curious what the higher-ranking nobles would think about the scar, and if they would even believe it. But as she was speaking, Julia quickly came in front of her, surprising her by her speed. She apprehended the weapon and knocked her to the ground, pinning her down. Kiera was confused by the swift movements. Julia told her that the decision to choose a concubine was her own will and not Mion's, so there was no place for her here. Kiera began laughing and stated that she needed to change her plans, which confused Julia, but she didn't have to wait much longer since a Groven appeared in front of them. Chapter 9. A Grovel was a fearful, aggressive monster, and Julia was shocked to see it present in the hunting grounds because the monsters in the grounds were strictly regulated. She decided to calm herself because right now the important thing was to deal with the monster. The Grovel's saliva was a potent poison that melted away skin with just a touch, and she knew that if she ran, the growing might go to the banquet hall, and Julia couldn't let such a dangerous monster roam in a place with so many people. Back when they were little, Andrew had once told her how to deal with one, and the only way to kill it was to either decapitate or strike from behind. While backing away, she told Kiera that she would try to distract the monster as much as she could and asked her to inform the knights. But Kiera, instead of helping, kicked Julia from behind, twisting her ankle as she was wearing high heels. Looking at her with murderous eyes, she wondered if she was pretending to be good until her last breath. Still not understanding the situation, Julia warned her that the monster was dangerous, but Kiera interrupted her and went near the monster, petting it like a dog. While looking at her, she stated that the only person who was endangered was her. She was shocked to realize that the monster was not attacking Kiera. Kiera told Julia that she was shocked by her unexpected combat skills, but since her ankle was twisted, she won't be able to escape, and ordered the monster to attack her. As the monster jumped for the attack, Julia somehow managed to block it using the dagger, but was blown away by the sheer force of the attack. She quickly gained ground, and while shaking with fear, she was grateful that her reflexes worked quickly. She decided to be careful to not get hurt, but most importantly, she decided to protect her wedding ring at all costs. Seeing her shiver in fear, Kiara laughed and called her pretty, telling her to stop resisting and accept her death. She told her that she would be there to bear a child herself. Julia realized that this bitch was crazy and was certainly not in her right mind. She began wondering of a way to defeat the monster. All she could think was for Mion to be here, because he would certainly know how to handle the situation. She suddenly remembered all the exhaustive training they had done together and how Mion never got tired of doing the same movements over and over. She remembered how, when she asked him if going through the succession lessons every day was exhausting on top of taking good care of her, he had replied that he was doing it just because he wanted to protect her and had told her that she was always alone since she became a princess. He had also been looked down upon because her mother was a concubine. He told her that ever since she chose him and came into his life, he had made up his mind to become stronger than anybody else so that nobody could treat her poorly, remembering Mion's promise. She made up her mind that she would also protect him because she understood that if she died, Kiera would control Andrew just how she wanted, and she could not let somebody as dangerous as her get close to him. She knew that just like how Mion protected her, it was now her turn to protect him. And with the determination she promised, she wouldn't back down, but Kiera, seeing her wield the weapon once again, began laughing hysterically, asking her if she really thought she could hit her with the tiny little knife, calling it a bold dream. She asked Julia if she really believed that being called queen really meant something, and asked her if she knew what the people were calling her behind her back by making fun of her. She replied that everyone addresses her as the god's favorite, a queen who can't even bear a child, finally ordering her to not act out of place and die like the worthless stone she was. The monster again attacked her, but this time she was not nervous. She remembered Mion's teaching as if he was right beside her. Keeping the tip of the sword aimed at the monster, she kept her eyes on the enemy, and with a swift stroke, she decapitated the monster in half. Chapter 10. After dispatching the beast, Julia was relieved because the banquet hall would be safe. but she knew that she was injured somehow during the battle. She got scratched and knew that the poison would soon spread throughout her body if she was not treated right away. Kiera, on the other hand, was losing her mind, not believing that her beast and her plan had failed. In anger, she screamed that she knew that Julia could only use a bow. Hearing her remark, Julia questioned her about the person she heard it from, frankly telling her not to use Iris as an excuse because the fact that she could use a sword was only known to a select few knights who trained with Mion. She asked Kiara to tell the truth, but their conversation was interrupted when they heard other voices coming towards them. Julia wondered if the people from the banquet were looking for her because she had been gone, but Kiera broke her thought and, while laughing, told her that although it would have been better if she had died, she could still stick to the original plan. She used her magic to remove the monster's body and, while looking at her, told her that she would show her where her position truly lay. Julia was confused about what she was going to do, but Kiera suddenly screamed, calling for attention, and the nobles soon gathered to where they were. Everyone was shocked on seeing Kiera was on the ground and the queen holding a dagger. They were whispering about the unusual scene, and we could also see Iris present there. Julia understood that it made it look like she was trying to kill Lady Kiera and wondered if anybody would believe her if she told the truth. Kiera began her top-level acting, pleading to the queen to not kill her, and started apologizing. She took all the blame and stated that she wanted to only contribute to Semele as a noble lady. The people, upon hearing her, started discussing among themselves that they didn't realize that it was a great offense to become a concubine. Julia realized that Kiera was trying to make it seem like she threatened to take her life, and she knew that none of the nobles would take her side. Kiera kept on performing while covering her eyes, trying to pretend to cry. She told her that she understood that because she was Mion's former fiancée, she must be a thorn in her side, and her return must have worried her, and she started begging her not to kill her. The nobles were questioning if the queen was really jealous of Kiera and had tried to kill her, shaming her for such an outrageous act. They questioned whether she was acting this way because Mion would choose Kiera or whether it was just her nature. They were even talking about how they won't be able to entrust the future of the nation to someone who was so emotional, blaming it on her being from a small nation. Julia realized that this is what Semele was to her, a lonely place without any allies. Finally, somebody came to her defense, and it was none other than Kiera's best friend, Iris. She cried and demanded that everyone stop talking, and while reaching Julia, she questioned all the nobles if they dared to speak such disrespectful words in front of the queen and asked them if they were blind and not able to see that Julia was injured. That quickly shut the nobles down, but Kiera spoke, asking Iris if she had not heard what she said. Trying to manipulate her by calling her only friend, she told Iris that she was injured because the queen had attacked her. But Iris, having none of it, shut her down by telling her that she could hear her, but Julia, the queen, was also injured, and since royalty has been harmed, it can't be settled just by words, finally asking her to watch her language in front of others. She turned towards Julia and asked her to explain what had happened. Julia was confused because she thought Iris didn't like her. She finally spoke, telling everyone that a moment ago a beast appeared, but as she was speaking, she also felt the poison spreading. The nobles didn't believe that a beast would appear in the royal hunting grounds, as the knights should have cleared the beast before the hunt even began. Julia knew that even if she claimed that Kiera controlled the beast, no one would have believed her, and she decided to not speak on it. She told everybody that it was a grove, and the monster attacked both of them, and she was injured while trying to protect Kiara from the beast. Kiera smiled while saying that there was no trace of a beast, and yet she was claiming such a baseless thing and accused her of threatening. Julia, while looking at Kiera, remarked that she must be in shock and confused, asking the guards to move her somewhere and treat her quickly. She didn't react much because this was just a ceremonial hunting festival, and she didn't want the matter to escalate any further, as she needed to investigate how she found out that she could use a bow. As the nobles argued about Julius's remarks, Iris shut them down by telling them that their nobility had fallen very far because they were questioning the queen's words over a lady. She even asked the nobles if they were not worried about the king's reaction after he found out about it. Kiera tried to manipulate the situation once again, asking Iris if she was threatening the nobles right then, but Iris ordered the guard to take her to her quarters because Kiera looked exhausted. She supported Julia, who was about to faint, and told her that although she may not like how everything was going, she pleaded for her to endure it as they would settle and discuss this matter later. Julia asked Iris why she was helping her, but Iris only apologized, telling her that it might be late. Julia realized that her head was spinning. She looked back at Iris, and she wanted to reply, but the poison had weakened her so much that she couldn't speak. As her vision was failing, she heard Iris shouting for a healing potion and also someone calling her name, but she couldn't stay conscious any longer.
That's all for today. See you in the next episode, friends. Until then, keep reading manga.